You're not the only one who has noticed bare shelves in your local grocery store. In 2022, food shortages are indeed a problem. President Biden cautioned of food shortages as just a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on March 24, 2022. Food shortages will be real, he said. The cost of these sanctions is not just placed on Russia. It is also imposed on a large number of nations, including European countries and our own. In terms of wheat, Russia and Ukraine have been Europe's breadbaskets. What's lacking from your local grocery store shelves varies based on where you reside and the climate. In the near term, supply chains are slowed by winter storms. Plus, everyone rushing to buy bread and milk before a blizzard hits. Based on whether you buy at large box stores or alternative businesses, such as local farmers markets, different locations may have shortages of certain items. This video will go through some of the details behind the expected worldwide food shortage. So let's get started. Number 1. Overview on the current food supply situation. Americans have begun to bear the economic hardship of rising food costs as a result of the disastrous conflict. In addition, gas prices have risen. Russian oil has been prohibited in the United States, and if Ukraine skips the wheat growing season, customers may expect a significant hike in their food expenses, according to experts. There have also been reports of panic buying at a few supermarkets. Ukraine and Russia contribute around a quarter of the world's wheat. These nations do not immediately export wheat to the United States, but their absence from the global market might put a strain on supply and drive up prices. Russia's actions are endangering global food security by interrupting the chain of crucial agricultural supplies. President Biden stated before that a food shortage is going to be real, as just a consequence of U.S. sanctions imposed on Russia in response to Russian President Vladimir Putin's attack on Ukraine. With regard to food shortage, yes, we did talk about food shortages, and it's going to be real, Biden said at a news conference following a meeting with other international leaders at a NATO summit in Brussels, Belgium. As the crisis in Ukraine escalates, Americans, especially all who struggle to make ends meet, are actually starting to feel the impact of the crisis half a globe away on their daily food costs. It all started with a sharp increase in petrol costs. Now that Russian oil is prohibited in the United States and global energy shortage is at an all-time high, analysts predict that grocery expenses will climb in the coming months, particularly if Ukraine skips its wheat planting season. According to the Observatory for Economic Complexity, Russia and Ukraine contribute 25% of the global wheat production. Although neither one of these nations directly sells wheat to the United States, their disappearance from the global market is projected to put pressure on supplies and drive up prices. Number 2. The world's food supply is jeopardized by a fertilizer shortfall as sanctions strike Russia. Farmers throughout the world are cutting back on fertilizer use as well as limiting the amount of territory they're cultivating, as nothing more than a result of sky-high fertilizer costs, a spillover from the Ukraine-Russia conflict, which has some agriculture sector experts warning of food shortages. Sanctions imposed by the United States on Russia, a significant exporter of potash, ammonia, urea, and other soil nutrients, have interrupted supplies of those critical inputs all over the world. Fertilizer is essential for maintaining high yields of corn, soy, rice, and wheat. Farmers are trying to make changes. The tilt can be observed in Brazil's agricultural powerhouse, where several farmers are just using less fertilizer on their corn, and some federal politicians are advocating for the extraction of potash on protected indigenous territories. Small farmers in Zimbabwe and Kenya are turning to waste to fertilize their crops. One canola farmer in Canada has indeed started stockpiling fertilizer for the 2023 season, anticipating even increased expenses. Farmers in other parts of the world are actually taking similar steps. All of them voiced worry about fertilizer prices and accessibility. Fertilizer costs are predicted to rise 12% this year in the United States, after jumping 17% in 2021, according to figures from the American Farm Bureau Federation and the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. Some producers are thinking about switching to crops with lower fertilization requirements. Some intend to farm a smaller area. Some believe they'll just use less fertilizer, which agricultural experts warn would reduce output. The most vulnerable countries are those in underdeveloped countries, where farmers have fewer financial means to withstand the storm. Previous to Russia's attack on its neighbor on February 24, worldwide fertilizer costs have already been high, as record natural gas and coal prices push several fertilizer producers to restrict output in the energy-hungry sector. Number 3. Everything adds up to the double blow for the world's food supply. Russia and Ukraine are two of the world's largest grain producers. They account for over 30% of the world wheat exports and 20% of global corn exports, when combined. Grain supplies over the Black Sea have already been hampered. Stalled shipments from those two nations have aided in the acceleration of global food prices. According to the World Bank, a number of developing nations are facing near-term wheat supply problems as a result of their significant reliance on Ukrainian exports. However, the fertilizer situation is more concerning in some ways, since it might stifle food production elsewhere in the globe, which could help make up the difference. According to Maximo Torero, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization senior economist, Brazil, the world's largest soybean exporter, is largely reliant on imported fertilizers like potash, which accounted for 38% of crop nutrients consumed last year. Half of those cargoes came from Russia and Belarus. Brazilian farmers had already been reducing corn seedlings due to the increasing fertilizer prices leading up to the Ukraine-Russian conflict. As per AgroConsult, a Brazilian agriculture consulting business, soybean production would undoubtedly be affected as well, with producers growing more gently than in recent years. In Zimbabwe, corn producers have been compelled to create their own fertilizer due to a lack of affordable imports. India is gradually shifting to Canada to substitute Russian fertilizer supplies for its burgeoning farm industry. Meanwhile, Thailand's trademark rice harvest is under threat. According to Thai official figures, Russia and Belarus accounted for 12% of the country's fertilizer imports last year. However, obtaining fertilizer from overseas might be difficult, in part because domestic fertilizer price limits are putting pressure on Thai importers as global market prices rise. The year before, the worldwide prices rose owing to robust demand and rising energy prices. China tightened fertilizer export restrictions to safeguard its own farmers. According to Gavin Zhu, lead fertilizer analyst in the Shanghai Office of Commodities Consultancy, CRU, Beijing is anticipated to lift such limitations this year, significantly enhancing world supplies. However, given the current state of the global market, he believes it is less likely. Concerns about increasing prices and a lengthy Ukraine conflict have prompted some farmers to prepare ahead. Number 4. 2022. Here are all the groceries that may be missing from store shelves due to food shortages. The supermarket shortages we're witnessing this year are caused by a multitude of factors. It's a mix of elements: supply chain challenges and driver shortages, package scarcity, and labor limitations at manufacturing and production factories, since workers haven't returned since the COVID shutdown. In 2022, meat shortages, particularly of beef and poultry, will be a problem once more. Many stores are running out of meat and poultry. This is due to a number of problems, the most serious of which being manpower shortages in industrial plants. According to Food Business News, beef would likely face the biggest shortages because the job in meat facilities is more labor-intensive. This year, dairy as well may be in short supply. Dairy shortages in your local supermarket may be caused by a combination of expensive crops for feeding cows and chicks, high transportation costs, and shortages of packaging materials, particularly plastics. Labor shortages, in addition to material constraints, may have an influence on grocery store shelves in terms of transportation employees and supermarket staff who supply the dairy case. As a result, you may have fewer choices when it comes to milk, cheese, particularly cream cheese, yogurt, and other dairy products. Supply chain concerns have disrupted the business side of commercial egg production, similar to other food shortages we've seen. Rising costs, feed, freight, and labor, supply constraints, and government regulation have all put a pressure on the company's total profitability. As a result, producers may reduce flock numbers, discontinue exporting to certain areas, or sell eggs formerly supplied to consumers to manufacturers that utilize them as components in other products, resulting in a reduction in the number of eggs offered in grocery stores. Certain fruits and vegetables, as well as things created using food, may be in short supply due to crop failures and supply chain challenges. High aluminum costs and scarcity may result in canned food and beverage shortages this year, as they did in 2021. This applies to canned food as well as canned pet food. Due to scarcity, supply chain challenges, and greater shipping costs, imported commodities, such as cheeses and other foreign-produced items, may be in short supply. So what are your thoughts on this? Have you noticed such food shortages? Share with us your thoughts by leaving a comment.